And hey, everybody, thanks for joining us here. This is Brian Cain with the Coaching Matters group coaching program and podcast sponsored by Fundraising University. And super excited to have you join us here tonight. And, before we get started, I just want to welcome everyone to the Coaching Matters group coaching podcast sponsored by Fundraising University. We'd like to take the time to just say thank you to any current Fundraising University coaches and administrators joining us on the call today, as well as a shout out to Athletic Director Marty Tonis and his coaching staff with Horizon High School in Colorado. They're joining us live with Mike Bahoon, owner of Fundraising University, tonight. Now, Fundraising University is the top high school fundraising company in the United States, helping to raise over $150 million for programs since its inception in 2009. Special congratulations is in order tonight as Fundraising University reached a major milestone of helping a high school football team in Colorado to raise over $100,000 in 1 week. Let me say that again, raised over $100,000 in 1 week. They had the opportunity to spend some time with head coach Garrett Looney, and I want to take a look here at a special video that we put together to feature them and their great success. Let's take a look.
Yes, born and raised in Colorado, played locally high school at Columbine High School, won a state championship there. Played college football up at Northern Colorado, so stayed in state. Coached at several high schools around the area, most recently Eagle Crest, Valor before that, won a couple championships there, and then I've been the head coach here at Mount Vista for 3 years now. I think the biggest thing is you make a clear expectation, just like you do for everything you do in a program, whether that's practice, whether that's lifting, whether that's how you play, how you dress, how you do everything. We had a certain number of cards each kid needed to sell, and we don't really take excuses for that any more than we wouldn't take excuses for missing a practice. So really setting the culture up to where the kids are bought into it. This is the only fundraiser that we do. We make it clear that this is the most important thing that we do because of that, and the kids bought into it. The expectation from me and my staff is that there are no excuses to not sell them. So, and it's not about the card, it's more about building that sense of community and using the card really as a tool for that. I think just the ease and use of it, I think it was easy to sell. I think obviously getting the vendors around here to buy in and be a part of the program was huge too. And I think just the way that this is set up, the way the program is set up, it's easy for me as a coach to put it together, and it makes it a lot easier on the kids. When I'm not stressing about it, the kids aren't going to stress on it. So I think the $30 card honestly sold more. I mean, it did sell more. We sold more cards at 30 than we did at 20. So that was irrelevant to me here. Again, I don't think it was about the card. I think it was about our kids getting out in the community and the community supporting our kids in our school. It was just the meetings and the check-ins with the kids to make sure we were on track, and then having those individual conversations with kids that weren't meeting where we needed them to be every few days. I mean, overall, not very much work at all, because again, I think it's a self-sustainable system, and the kids did a great job, and our community did a great job of supporting it. We just bought new squat racks for our weight room. Those are not cheap, so that was a big part of it. We're gonna do another new Jordan uniform next year, which will be a big part of that too. So giving it back to the kids because they earned it and they deserve it. I think the ease of use, I think the group and the gentleman that worked with us, Mr. Morse, was awesome. I mean, he's a former coach. He knows what's going on, and he knows how busy coaches are. He did a great job of checking in. He did a great job of checking in with the kids. And I think any way that you can be with a company that takes the pressure off of me as the coach or my coaching staff, I would encourage people to use that, because again, we have enough going on that a lot of people look at fundraisers and think, oh, it's a bunch of work I have to do. But fundraiser, you did a great job of doing all the work for us and really just getting our kids out in the community, which was awesome. So I would definitely use this company, moving forward, just because of that.
And huge congratulations on a successful fundraiser, and super excited tonight to have someone talk about success. We have Coach Leslie Huntington, who's here. Coach Huntington, I'm going to spotlight you and pin you here for a second so that everyone can see your shirt. As we mentioned, when adversity hits, right? The one thing we want to say is we want to say one word: good. And a little background on Coach Huntington. She's a mental performance mastery certified coach. She's been the head softball coach at the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire for over 20 years. She's the all-time winningest coach and earned her 500th career win back in February of 2021. She's going to be inducted into the National Fast Pitch Coaches Association Hall of Fame this upcoming December. And in 2008, she led the Blugolds to an NCAA Division III national championship. It was the first in program history. So, Coach Huntington, excited to hear you talk tonight about your experience as a coach and building better players and better people by using some of the mental skills that any of our coaches here can use on a daily basis. So, thanks for being with us, Coach.
Yeah, I'm super excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and I'm just going to give kind of start off tonight with just talking about, as a successful coach in softball. And I think if you can coach, you can coach. So if we put you on a football program or on a soccer field or on a baseball field or on a softball field, you're going to have success. So what are some of those key components that you think as a coach, any high school coach, college coach, youth coach could use from a mental performance standpoint, maybe starting with that one word that's on your shirt and why you chose that?
Yeah. I actually made this shirt about a week ago. So I got a cricket, I got a heat press. I'm trying to figure all that out, checking out YouTube and trying to figure out how to do all that stuff, saving the program some money, which is ironic with the fundraising but yeah, trying to save the program some money. But, I told our players, we are about in our second week of fall practice, and we do a little bit of chalk talk at the beginning of every practice, and it goes in different directions. I always have a grand plan, but then don't be perfect, just be present. And one of the last practices, I just said, I wrote it on our whiteboard in our dugout, and I wrote down the word good, and I said, you guys are going to get used to hearing me say this. I said, because you come to practice and you just, struggled with an exam, and my response is going to be good. What are you going to learn from it? How can you prepare better next time? So many things that word is applicable. And I love it. It's so simple. And every time I say it, I get a little smirk out of them because they kind of know that that's what they can expect from me at this point. So, yeah, that's just one of so many different things that, I've been fortunate enough to be a part of all this mental performance mastery training and learning so many things. And we try to do a lot rather than a lot of little, but there's some really good things that we can implement into our systems and do things consistently on a pretty regular basis.
We've got our chat function working here. So if any of the coaches or athletes that are with us, if you want to have a question for Coach Leslie Huntington or myself, please feel free to drop that here in our chat. And Coach Huntington, I want to come back to something that you mentioned, doing a chalk talk before practice. And I just last week was at the University of Houston, and their head coach, baseball coach, Todd Whitting. One of the things he does before every practice is what he calls a mental minute. And it's on the practice plan, and he'll talk with his team about some component of mental performance every day. How do you use that chalk talk? Is it always mental game? Do you also talk about maybe something related to softball? How do you use that chalk talk period?
Yeah, a lot of the times it is something to do with the mental game, and my players would laugh and say, well, mental minute turns into about a mental 45 minutes when coach starts talking at the beginning of practice. So I can't help it. I get fired up. I'm so passionate about it that I just kind of take it and run with it. But last week our topic was leadership, and we started talking about defining leadership and what do the younger players look for in someone that they feel like they're going to respect and follow, and it kind of just went from there. But that chalk talk is, it can be leadership. It can be talking about I've got the list, the process over outcome. We're going to talk about setting telescope goals and then breaking them down into the microscope goals and things like that, because our goal is to be a national champion. Well, what college doesn't want to win a national championship? And so my challenge to our players all the time is what's going to set us apart? And it's those finer details and spending the time spending the time on the mental game, because I think that that's something that, and I was one of those coaches for a long time that thought, oh, we got so much that we've got to get in here as far as X's and O's. We just don't have the time to do it. And now I'm like, the X's and O's can wait. This is the important stuff. This is going to be the difference maker between winning some games and not winning some games that maybe people think we shouldn't win. The mental game is going to win those games for us.
I heard you say that the mental game is a difference maker in winning those games, those championship games, those big games. What are the aspects of the mental game that you feel like help you to win those big games? Because there's one thing I know about all the coaches that are on this call. They're looking for strategies from you tonight that can help them win tomorrow.
Well, I think process over outcome is a huge one. And I go back immediately to the 2008 national championship game in the situation that we were in. We had a couple of players that were, it was tense. It was tense. And so I had to make a decision to have a conversation with a player at that point in time that could have turned that game either way, depending on how she responded to it. And so, E plus R equals O, there's another aspect of it. But it was process over outcome, because at no point in time did I ever panic and feel like we were going to lose that game. And I think that our players had bought into the process over outcome so much that they believed without a doubt that we were going to win that game. As it went into extra innings, we won it, I think, in the bottom of the ninth with a walk-off home run. And the point in that game where I just felt like everybody was in sync was our second baseman. She was an All-American that year. She led off the inning, and before she went to the plate, she said, "Coach, I'm going to win this thing right now." And I was like, cool, that'd be pretty sweet. And she hit a little dribbler ground ball and grounded out. And she came running back to the dugout, and she actually had a smile on her face. And I thought of all the things as far as how confident that player was, that everybody trusted the process, and all we had to do was keep playing one pitch at a time. And we were confident that we were still going to win the game. That was huge. That smile on her face, because this is a player that was super intense, and driven. And for her to have that response when she grounded out like she did in that moment, I think it just gave the entire team a ton of confidence.
Coach, when you're talking about building leadership, and I think that's one of the primary goals of the coaches that are on this call here tonight, is that they want to develop better student athlete leaders. They want to take their program from being a team that is, as we say, coach fed, where the players are always looking to the coach for the answer, versus player led, where the players are making decisions and taking action. And sometimes when we do that, we have what we call aggressive mistakes, and aggressive mistakes are going to win. Like, we'll take aggressive mistakes all day. We just can't have passive mistakes where I'm not doing anything because I'm waiting around to be told what to do all the time. So talk about leadership and some of the characteristics, or should I say, some of the strategies that you do to help develop leaders in your program. Is there anything specifically that you're doing?
Well, I think one of the big things is we just talk a ton about the importance of each player leading themselves well. And the better job each individual does of leading themselves well, the less they have to have a teammate hold them accountable. And then we define what that looks like. What's it look like to lead yourself well in the weight room? What's it look like to lead yourself well in the classroom? What's it look like to lead yourself well in the community? When we do camps, what's it look like to lead yourself well when you're instructing younger players? And we talk about all those things, and everybody gets on the same page with what those things look like. Because we have in our program, we don't have captains per se. We have squad leaders. We call them squad leaders. And one of my biggest criteria for squad leaders, and I choose our squad leaders. We don't vote. I'll have discussions with players about what they think and stuff like that. But for the most part, I choose who the squad leaders are. And I tell them that my number one criteria is you have to have proven to me that you can lead yourself first, because you can't lead others if you can't first lead yourself. So it's a lot of talking, a lot of defining what that looks like, and having that discussion. And then I meet with my leaders weekly. And we actually use a Jeff Jansen book on leadership, and we go through that. We go through a chapter at a time. But the leadership part is not just for those squad leaders then. So we take a chapter that we work with those team leaders, And then the following week, we use that same chapter, and that's what the basis of our Chalk Talks is.
Beautiful. So when you're looking at, from a recruiting standpoint, let's say you're going to look at a high school athlete and you're looking for somebody who leads. Let's talk about, because I love what you said there for the coaches, and this would be a great note and a great takeaway for them is, what does it look like to lead yourself well? What does it look like to lead yourself first? And we talk about in my mental performance coaches certification, like lead your 20 square feet, meaning lead your locker, and then work on the person next to you. And if everyone does that, we get the entire locker room starting with myself and then having the accountability of the person next to me. And I think 3 characteristics of championship teams that we're all trying to implement. So coaches, if you have a chance to write this down, these are 3 characteristics that if you can bring to a program, whether you're a mental performance coach or consultant on this call, or you're a team's head coach. Number 1 is clarity. And clarity is, I know exactly what it looks like. Clarity is, here's the behaviors we want, the behaviors we don't want. And when Coach Huntington is saying, this is what it looks like to lead yourself well, and you have that discussion, that creates clarity. Second thing is accountability, holding yourself and leading yourself first, and then demanding that your teammates do the same and live in alignment with what it looks like to be a Blugolds, what it looks like to be a Horizon Husky. And then the third step is support. Because it's difficult to lead. It's difficult to be elite. And you have to have the support of people bringing you and putting you back into the battle. If you watch a boxing match, if you watch a UFC fight, those athletes don't walk to the ring by themselves. They go to the ring with like 4 people in their corner man. And those corner men are there to support those athletes as they go through the challenge. And that's, I think, what we're looking for, is how do we create in our program that support, that accountability, and create that clarity on what it looks like to be a leader. So coach, when you're out looking for leaders, or you're looking for leaders in your program, what are some of the very specific behaviors that you go looking for in athletes?
Well, I'm going to watch for, players that are physically and verbally acknowledging teammates when they don't succeed. So a kid strikes out, she comes back to the dugout. Who are the kids that are high-fiving her, tapping her on the helmet, saying, hey, it's okay, you got the next one. On defense, a pitcher's just given up a big hit. Which one of those players is going into the circle and slapping her glove and saying, hey, you're good, you got this, you're going to be fine. So looking for those types of things. When it comes to leadership, it's maybe not necessarily strictly a leadership characteristic, but we look for the kids that are carrying their own gear bags. We look for the kids that are offering water to the officials, different things like that, different things that you wouldn't necessarily see everybody do. But just those subtle things that say, look at the character of this kid and look at what she's willing to do, as far as maybe nobody else on her team is doing it, but it's that one player that's doing that kind of stuff. And that's the type of thing that we're paying attention to. I watch a player longer after her at bat than most people probably realize, especially if she's failed in the at bat. I'm going to watch her walk back to the dugout. I'm going to watch her when she goes into the dugout. I'm going to watch the way she takes her helmet off. I'm going to watch the way she takes her batting gloves off, the way she puts her bat down. I'm going to watch the way she responds to teammates when they acknowledge her when she comes back in the dugout. So all those little things that, really don't have much to do with a batting average, but everything to do with the kind of kid that we're going to want to come in and be a part of our culture.
It's funny, Coach, you mentioned about the kid carrying their own gear bag. And for our high school student athletes that are listening to this and our high school coaches here, what an important concept. And, the New Zealand All Blacks, I always go back to the book Legacy about the New Zealand All Blacks, written by a guy named James Kerr. And the New Zealand All Blacks, we don't talk a ton about rugby here in the US, but we've got some international coaches on our call as well. And rugby's massive in other parts of the world. And in the New Zealand All Blacks are the international team from the country of New Zealand. And one of the things that they talk about in the book Legacy is after they play a game, imagine Tom Brady and the Buccaneers last year when they won the Super Bowl, that Tom Brady takes a broom out of his bag, screws the broom together, and sweeps the locker room of all the pre-wrap, the dirt pellets from the turf field, everything that would be in that locker room before he sleeps up and throws away. That the best player in the world on the New Zealand All Blacks does that for his team after they win the world championship, because there's no greater honor than to serve your team. And they say that as an All Black, no one cleans up after us because we clean up after ourselves. And you see this last year, if you as a coach do a Google search for Army versus Oklahoma football. It was September 22nd, 2018, and Army takes Oklahoma, who's the number 4 team in the country, into overtime. And when the game's over, the Oklahoma student managers take a picture of the Army locker room because they left it spotless after the game. So I think when we're looking at leadership, carrying your own gear bag is a microcosm for that player who then maybe is doing their own laundry, cleaning their own room, know how to make their own food, taking, one word, responsibility for their life and for their career. Coach, talk about the importance of responsibility in our athletes who are on this call, taking that responsibility, but also as a coach, what are some things that you do to help foster that responsibility in your athletes?
Yeah, well, one of the things that we do is when I choose squad leaders, they decide who they're going to have in each squad. So this year we have 3 squad leaders. So we have 3 different squads. And so each of those squad leaders is in charge of that group of people. And then within those squads, we create accountability partners. So making sure that your accountability partner is getting to the weight room on time early in the morning if they have a lift, making sure that they're on time getting to practice. If they're running late, it's like I'm calling them and I'm asking them where they are. But again, the emphasis on leading themselves first and taking responsibility for themselves, because if they can do that, then it takes that pressure and that stress off that accountability partner to be like, hey, where the heck are you? Why aren't you here? You're supposed to be here right now. And then, everything from, like right now, our batting cages, they got some weeds in them. So I'm like, every time you go in the batting cage, you need to pull some weeds. Every time you step on the field, if there's a piece of paper or a piece of plastic or something on the grass or on the field, you need to pick it up and throw it in the garbage. When you're around campus, you see garbage on campus, pick that garbage up and put it in the garbage can, because it's not just the custodian's job to pick up the garbage. It's everyone's job to pick up the garbage. So those types of things as far as responsibility. And then also we talk about like early in the morning when the freshmen who live in the dorms have to come over to lift, they all meet in one location before they walk over to the gym so that no one is left behind. So that if someone's not there, they haven't all just kind of gone on and done their own thing. And now all of a sudden they're all in the weight room and they're like, well, where's so-and-so? They're waiting for each other. So if someone doesn't show up on time, they're running up to that dorm room and they're banging on that door and making sure that person gets up and makes it to lift on time. Because I just say, if one person's late, you're all late, because everybody is everybody else's responsibility. This is a team, and we're going to do things together, and we're going to have standards, and everybody's expected to uphold the standard, and you just don't leave anybody behind.
Yeah, I love that concept of a shared leadership model. And you're talking about squad leaders. And I've used the analogy probably similar of like boat crew leaders. And, setting up, I was just with a college baseball team that has 45 players. So we had 9 boat crews of 5 people, 9 boat crew leaders, 9 squad leaders. And something that we'd want to pass down to the whole team, we would task those 9 boat crew leaders with to then bring to the rest of their teammates. And the beautiful part about that is it provides an opportunity for those 9 boat crew leaders or 9 squad leaders to lead. And then from there, what it does is it creates what I call a shared leadership model, or to take a military term, it's called decentralized command, where centralized command is head coach, captain, right? Where you mentioned, you don't want to have a captain, you want to have leaders. Explain the difference. Because I think so many times when I've spoke at schools around the country, high schools, we've had the conversation of like, what makes a great captain? And I always say training. So let's not just train your captain. Let's train everyone in your program to be a leader, because ultimately what's the captain going to do? They're going to pick what uniform they wear. They're going to walk out and talk to the officials before the game. But ultimately, a leader is somebody who's going to have influence and impact. So talk a little bit more, Coach, if you would, about the difference between having a captain, which everyone looks to for one person to lead, which is extremely difficult, maybe impossible, versus having a shared leadership model and squad leaders. What made you decide to go to that model?
Well, I don't like the word captain in a team setting. I think that, too many times, and even at the college level, it's really difficult to get college student athletes to understand that, number one, they don't have to have a title to lead. And number two, just because they have a title doesn't mean they lead. And so I really wanted them to understand that it is about everyone learning how to lead, and everyone having that shared leadership ability and responsibility and growing as leaders. So I think that's the biggest thing as far as the difference for me, is that our leadership model is one where we want everyone to be a leader, and we want people to kind of emerge and evolve it with their leadership strengths, rather than, a player on the team looking at a captain and saying, well, that's not my job, I'm not the captain. So I want it to be everybody's job. Everybody's responsible for protecting the culture and taking care of the culture and sweeping the sheds. Everybody's responsible for that, not just the captain.
Love that concept of sweeping the sheds. And Yale University football coach Tony Reno, he had his team every year go through and read the book Legacy, and he would give at the end of practice the leader of his team, the team at Yale. It is an athletic department policy, call it a tradition, that every year the team at the end of the last game, they vote on the captain for the next year. It's something they've done for like 100 years, so they keep doing it. So they have a captain, but in that program specifically, it's a shared leadership model within each position group. But at the end of practice, he would have 2 brooms, and the captain every practice, and then a leader that was decided on that day by the team would take 2 brooms. They would sweep the locker room, use your term, sweep the shed after practice. And I remember the first 2-3 days, it took them like 2 hours because guys are leaving clothes on the ground or not putting their stuff back the way it's supposed to go. And the captain, who I believe now is a Navy SEAL, comes into the coach's office and said, hey, coach, after our team meeting today, I need the guys for about 5 minutes to show them some stuff. Showed him pictures of the locker room, showed him the time of how long he was in there to clean the locker room, and set the standard of this is what your locker is going to look like. And every day from that day moving forward till currently today, 4 years later, they will leave the locker looking a certain way when they leave. And I remember the coach told me like 3 days later, he had a knock on the door, and it was the custodian in the building. He said, hey, coach, usually it takes me a couple hours to clean your guys' locker room, and now I'm doing it under an hour. Like, I'm going to need some other stuff to do around here, And I just thought that was awesome, that no one has to clean up after you because you clean up after yourself. It's a sign of responsibility. It's a sign of respect. I'd like to go into some question and answer here with Coach Leslie Huntington. And first, before we go in there, I just want to once again recognize Fundraising University and owner Mike Bahoon is the official sponsor for the Coaching Matters Group Coaching Podcast. And current coaches, if you're interested and would like to be a Coaching Matters ambassador coach in your state and earn an extra $5,000 to $20,000 part-time, please contact Mike Bahoon. We're going to put that email address inside of the chat here, but it's mbahoon, MBAHUN at fundraisingu.net to inquire more about our ambassador coach program. I know we've got a lot of mental performance coaches on here that want to go in and work with high school and college programs. And sometimes the finances that we have as coaches become a hurdle for us to be able to do the things we want to do to move our programs forward, whether it's to going on team advances or retreats, however you want to say it, getting clothes for our program, getting a new cage, bringing in a mental performance coach like Coach Huntington, or someone to work with your team on culture, on leadership, on mindset and routines. Fundraising University can be a great way to raise those funds. And for our mental performance coaches, you can bring that as an added value to when you go work with teams to now take the hurdle of we can't afford it off the table. So contact Mike Bahoon. That's mbahoon at fundraisingu.net to learn more. And we're back with Coach Leslie Huntington. Coach Huntington, a couple of questions came in here that I want to have you talk about. And this one comes in from Coach Schmidt. And Coach Schmidt says, does it usually take a while for your first year players, your freshmen, to transition and buy into mental performance training for your team? Or is the buy-in process pretty quick because of the impactful leadership on your team? Talk about that buy-in to mental performance for your first year players.
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, in our program, I think that a lot of it, they buy in pretty quickly because we work really hard during the recruiting process to really let them know who we are. And we talk about our mental performance training, and tell them that we do a formal mental performance training process, for our student athletes in our program. So I think that the buy-in for our first year players is pretty quick because they already know that that's going to be a part of what we do. And I think it's actually a little bit of a good thing when it comes to recruiting. We really pique the interest of some of those kids that maybe haven't had that kind of training before, and they want to know what that's all about. And the other thing that we do is a lot of the kids that will join our team have been to one of our camps at some point. And we always do a mental performance session at our camps. And that's one of the biggest things at our camps that gets great feedback. We had a prospect camp just this last Saturday, and I had a player who came up to me at the end of the camp. We talked about the traffic light analogy and red light, yellow light, green light, refocus and release routines. And we talked through that for the first 30 minutes of the camp. And at the end of the camp, she came up to me and said, "Coach, I really, really liked the red light, yellow light, green light." She said, "When we were scrimmaging, I got a little frustrated." She was pitching, and she said, "I got a little frustrated, and I went back to what you talked about earlier at camp." And she said it really helped. So I think for that reason, in our program at least, I think the buy-in's pretty quick.
Coach, if you would unpack that maybe a little bit more, and we can kind of do this together here, of the signal light analogy, because I think for any coach who's on this call, whether you're coaching the All Blacks, the best sports team on the planet, or you're coaching a Division I college softball team, you're coaching at one of the top high schools in the country, at Horizon in Colorado, wherever it is that you're coaching, you're going to have athletes that are going to experience signal lights. Now, signal lights is a drill to be able to communicate and talk about self-awareness and kind of mentally, physically, and emotionally where I'm at in that moment. And my mentor, Ken Ravizza, who I know you were a big fan of, used to say all the time, you have to be where you need to be when you need to be there. Meaning when you're on this call, be on this call. When you're in the batter's box, be in the batter's box. When you're in school, be in school. Be where you need to be when you need to be there. And that requires self-awareness and understanding of our signal light. So could you unpack the signal light process for our coaches and athletes on the call here?
Sure. Yeah. So green light, everything's on go. Everything, it's like flow. It's like being in the zone. And so when you're in a green light, everything's going well. You're not thinking too much. I always say to the softball players, the pitches look like a beach ball when you're in a green light. So you have just simply a refocus routine when you're in a green light. When you're in a yellow light or a red light, what I tell players is if you're in a red light, you're probably going to be on the bench, because in a red light, you've completely lost your mental and emotional control and probably need a little bit of time to get that back rather than being able to get it back really, really quickly. But in a yellow light, you're it's that caution, right? And the players give me a hard time because I say, "What do you do when there's a yellow light?" And they all say, "Speed up." And I'm like, "No, slow down." But so in a yellow light release, it might be, an example I use is you're a batter and you just took a pitch for what you thought was a ball and the umpire called it a strike and you disagree with the call. And so you're a little bit irritated. You get out of the box. You're kind of getting ready to get back in the box again. And now you're still thinking about that pitch and you're still thinking, okay, if another one comes in, is he going to call that one a strike? So you're distracted. You're not focused on playing one pitch at a time. So the release routine. So with the release, stepping out of that batter's box, I'll just use hitting as an example, because that's one of the easiest things to use as an example. You step out of the box. The first thing you got to do is you got to have a focal point. A deep breath on a focal point. So I will use the foul pole a lot of times because most places have a foul pole. So a deep breath on a focal point, a physical release. So sometimes batters will take their batting gloves and undo the Velcro, do them back up. Some hitters will take their helmet off, adjust their hair, put the helmet back on. Some players will reach down, grab some dirt, give it a toss, whatever it is. But that physical release, that's basically, I'm letting this pitch go. I'm letting this pitch go. And then the last part is a verbal trigger. And so it could be, so what, next pitch? It could be, hit it hard. I'll say, you know, step in that batter's box and just repeat over and over and over. Hit it hard, hit it hard, hit it hard, hit it hard. Getting your mind in that one place that it needs to be, rather than stepping into the batter's box. And, you know, I ask this at camp all the time. I'm like, how many of you have ever stepped into the batter's box and the thought that goes through your mind is just don't strike out, and every hand goes up? And I'm just like, oh my goodness, we have work to do. So we talk about the yellow light and the red light release routine, the green light refocus routine. And then we practice that as well when we do our daily things in practice.
Beautiful. You know, Coach, we've got a question that came in here, and we've actually got two Horizon High Schools on here tonight. We've got a coach from Horizon High School in Arizona, the Huskies, and we got a lot of coaches and athletes in from Horizon High School in Colorado, the Hawks. Now, when we're talking about culture, and when we address culture and we talk about core principles, let's say we use the Horizon Hawks as an example, and they were to say Hawks, H, hardworking, A, attitude, W, let's use a softball team, win the next pitch or win this pitch. K, Kaizen, which is a Japanese word for constant, never-ending improvement. It's kind of like how we might look at excellence. And then selfless, being a great team player. When we look at creating a set of core values or core principles for a program, is there a set that you use with your program, a set of core principles that kind of drive the behavior of the people in your culture?
Yep, absolutely. In fact, we have a big graphic on the back of our dugout that has our mission and our logo and our core values. So we use Blugolds. So it's belief, love, unity, gratitude, ownership, legacy, discipline, and selfless.
One more time, Coach.
Yep.
You got belief, love.
Yep. Belief, love, unity, gratitude, ownership, legacy, discipline, and selfless.
Now, let me ask you this question. This is awesome. How does having a set of core principles like this help you as a coach?
Oh, it's huge. It's part of almost every conversation I have with our student athletes. Anytime we have a little bit of a struggle, I can come back to one of those core principles and we can talk about how those core principles apply to the struggle. Anytime we celebrate something, we talk about how much we believe that we can be successful. We talk about love being an unconditional thing in our program, and this being a judgment-free zone where our goal is to just love each other well. Unity obviously is a huge thing with any team. You want to become one. The gratitude piece is every day, get to rather than have to, right? We get to come to practice. We don't have to go to practice. And then ownership is huge. I use ownership almost every single day. And we talk about owning our own behaviors, owning our successes, as well as owning our failures. And being okay with that, owning our mistakes. And one of the things that I really hammer with our players is, I can live with your mistakes if you're willing to own them. But it's when you start to pass the buck, you start to make excuses. That's when it gets difficult for me to support you. And then legacy, leaving the jersey better than they found it. How do they want, when they're done with their 4 years in the program, what do they want the next person that wears that jersey number to remember? Or what do they hope that next person in that jersey number, how do they hope they represent that jersey number? And then discipline, we talk a lot about discipline, not meaning punishment, which I think a lot of people kind of, look at that the wrong way. Discipline just meaning, are you doing what you say you're going to do? And are you doing it when nobody's watching? And then selfless, really meaning in our program, and this is one that I think sometimes is one of the most difficult things for them to wrap their heads around, is selfless means I got to become my best self if I'm going to help you become your best self. So, we have one player in particular in our program, just an outstanding human being. She's a nursing major. She's one of the nicest kids you'll ever know. She's always wanting, she's just serving her teammates, and sometimes at her own expense. And so I'm working a lot with her on understanding that the better she cares for herself, the more sleep she's getting, the more time, the better job she does with her time management, the harder she works on herself in the weight room and doing her reps, then she can open herself up to help her teammates even more.
I love that, Coach. So much goodness coming out of what you're sharing there. And I think that one thing to tie into what you're just sharing there about that last student athlete you were talking about is self-care is really selfless. And I think so many times as busy coaches, we think that self-care and making time for us to work out, making time for us to relax, making time for us to meditate or to journal or take care of us, we think that that's selfish. And you have to make time for it. No one's going to make time for it. And if you don't create boundaries, no one's going to make time for it for you. And if you don't make boundaries for yourself, you're going to get pulled in a lot of directions until you break. And when I say self-care is selfless, here's what I mean. When you make the time to take care of yourself and what I call the 4 fundamentals of optimal living for any coach or athlete, how you eat, how you move, your mindset, how you sleep. When you take care of you to be the best version of you so that you can give your best to others, that requires an emphasis and a priority on self-care, taking care of thyself. And when you do, you can then be selfless because you can give more of you away and give your best to other people. And I think, that's one of the things that fires me up about Fundraising University is how their mission to, help coaches and athletes get the most out of the scholastic athletic experience, right? To provide the opportunity for coaches to execute their job, which is the most important job in our entire school system, at the highest level. So Fundraising University is always looking for individuals who are competitive, self-starters, empathetic, organized, and teachable to partner with. And for our current coaches that are on this call, contact Mike Bahoon, CEO of Fundraising University, mbahoon@fundraisingu.net. We're going to put it in the chat to inquire about being an assistant coach or area representative, in those openings within Fundraising University. Visit fundraisinguniversity.net, fundraisingu.net/franchising, all in the chat and our show notes, to find out more about becoming a franchise university owner so you can help coaches and athletes dream big and raise more. Speaking about dreaming big and raising more, Coach, one of the things that you mentioned was the legacy of the jersey and leaving that number better for someone else. And I think it was the University of Vermont ice hockey team I was working with, and they had the locker number, similar to the jersey number. And inside of that locker was a list of all the players who had ever worn that number. And that player, whoever wore that number that year, had to write a letter about what they were going to put into that jersey, about the effort they were going to give, about the character they were going to bring, about the responsibility they were going to take, about how they were going to live the core principles of that team, which was Cats. And they would have to write that letter and send it to everyone who had worn that jersey number. So every player in the history of the program received a letter from a player in the program every year that was wearing that jersey as a way to connect the alumni. Is there anything specifically that you do to kind of promote that legacy of the jersey and kind of connect previous Blugolds to the current Blugolds?
You know what? I'm stealing that idea. I love that. I hadn't thought of that before. We've talked about, having our players research their jersey number and learn about the players that have worn that jersey number prior to them. Were there All-Americans in that jersey, for example, but we just haven't done that yet. And we're really making an effort to reconnect with our alums right now. And so I think it's a perfect time to do exactly that type of thing. I love that idea.
Yeah, I think that's a cool one. It's one of the best I've ever heard. And that's the reaction a lot of coaches have to it, because they can kind of go back and see who's worn this jersey. And it's a way to connect, it's a way to connect the current with the previous. Here's another one is your, I call them boat crews. The term you use, let me look through my notes again. You called them squad leaders. Yep. So your squads, how many squads do you currently have on your softball team?
We have 3. So
3 squads. How many players per squad?
There would be, got to do the math, about 6. Okay. 6 or 7.
And have they named their squads?
They have not.
Okay. So University of Houston, they had, let's call it 7 squads. So they took the 7 best teams. And one year, let's call it 2016, they went to an NCAA super regional. So they had squadron 2016. They had a team in 2008 that went to a regional championship, Squadron 2008. So what they did is they named the squads, their boat crews, after the years of their best finishes. And then that squad group got to do a Zoom call with a player from one of those teams and hear about the legacy of that team. And then the next day, that squad group had to communicate in front of the team about what they learned from that player from that year, which was a really cool way for like the current Houston baseball players to hear about the program in the past and how fired up those alumni were, like, for the team to get this thing going again and get them back to where they want to be. So I thought that was a really cool concept of promoting the legacy of the jersey. And, something that you shared that hit me was this concept of gratitude and love. And one of the athletes I was working with today taught me this. And he said, if you take your hand and you touch your thumb to your pointer finger. So everyone who's on the call, go ahead and do this with me. This is the UIW Peacock, by the way. But if you go ahead and or UIU, University of Upper Iowa Peacocks, touch your pointer finger, middle finger, ring finger, pinky finger. And we call them haggle statements, HAGL. This helps with gratitude, helps with love, helps with positive mindset. I have, I am, I give, I love. And if you sit there once a day, you're sitting in class before class starts. You do it when you're laying in bed. I did it today at the dentist as I was waiting. I was in the chair getting, my whole body shocked with nerves as they're cleaning my teeth. And I'm saying, okay, I have energy. I have energy to give. I am fortunate to be able to do what I love every day. I give everything I have to people I work with. I love coaching, right? So I just go through those every day. And it's like, you do a haggle statement and try to have a bad day. Do a haggle statement consistently, let's say on the hour, every hour, and try to be depressed. It's going to be really difficult. Do your haggle statements and try to not be an energy lifter and have a smile on your face for other people. So bring those haggle statements. Coach, as we bring tonight's call to a close, first, I want to personally thank you for taking time to join us and giving your value and your experience to our coaches and athletes here through the Coaching Matters group coaching program and podcast. And one of our questions comes in, I thought was so good. It comes from Tom in Chicago. And Tom says, Coach, I have a 13-year-old daughter listening. She wants to be a leader. If you could plant one seed inside of her brain and that one seed would germinate, what would that one seed be?
Ooh, that's a great question. I love it. I think the one seed for a 13-year-old would be work really hard at not comparing yourself to anybody else. Your journey is your journey and yours alone. And it doesn't have to be the same as anyone else's. It doesn't have to look anything close to what anybody else's journey is. Process over outcome. Your journey is yours alone. Don't compare yourself. Just compete with becoming just a little bit better version of you every single day. And that's the path to being happy. That's the path to being grateful. That's the path to satisfaction.
Love that. Coach, you might just give me the title of today's podcast: Compete, Don't Compare. Boom. See, because when you play the comparison game, you lose only every single time, right? The competition is you. Compete, don't compare. If we would, let's go into our chat here. I'd like to hear from 3 people. Number 1 takeaways, because when we're on these calls, I want you to always remember the E to E to E ratio: energy, education, entertainment. Let's not show up here looking for entertainment. This is not what this is about, even though it's entertaining. We want it to be about education and things that you can take, strategies you can use, ideas and concepts you can bring into your life and into your program. We also want it to be energy building. We want you coming off this call going, man, that was worth me being on that call. Man, that was worth me listening to that podcast. I just got juiced up. Education, energy, entertainment. Let's make sure we double, triple down on the education, and we double and triple down on the energy that we're building. Let's minimize the entertainment. Let's make what we're getting from our education competing every day, building energy from competing every day. Let's make that our entertainment, not TV. Unless, of course, you're watching the Blugolds and the College Road Series, then we'll be tuning in. Coaching Matters live group call. Let's see what we got coming in. We got must train everybody to be leaders. Everyone is a leader. Here's my definition of a leader. If anybody is counting on you for anything, that qualifies you as a leader. If anyone is counting on you for anything that qualifies you as a leader, Tom says, compete, don't compare. And Shane said, leave it better than you found it. Coach Leslie, any parting thoughts for you tonight with our coaches or athletes here? Let me have you wrap it up this way. This will be a fun way as we grow this Coaching Matters program. Why does coaching matter to you?
Oh boy. I think it's just about the opportunity to impact and doing it in a way that requires, honestly, very little effort. It's heart and it's what I feel like I was put on this earth to do. And some of the best compliments that I can get are when alumni come back to town and they make a point of stopping to say hi. So that's what it's all about. It's just, I haven't worked in over 20 years.
I like to say, measure success in weddings, not wins. Or maybe we say both, measure success in weddings and wins, right? But every wedding you go to is maybe worth 10 wins. So Coach Huntington, thanks for being here tonight. Really, really appreciate you taking time. I know you guys are in the thick of things here with the fall, preparing to go compete for a national championship this spring. I want to just say thank you for joining us here and thank everybody for being a part of Coaching Matters. Until next time, let's not count those days. Let's make the days count. And we'll catch you next time on Coaching Matters. Thanks for being here.